In the current context of the escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas, much attention is also focused on a pivotal figure in this ongoing struggle, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In today's world-famous figures program, let's delve into the background of this Prime Minister and the significant milestones in his political career. Benjamin Netanyahu was born on October 21, 1949, in Tel Aviv, Israel, and grew up in Jerusalem. He joined the Israeli military in 1967 and transitioned to the Special Forces in 1972. He later became the leader of the Likud party, a right-wing faction, in 1993 and served as Prime Minister in multiple terms. He spent a significant part of his youth in Philadelphia, where his father, renowned Jewish historian Benzion Netanyahu, was a professor in 1967. He returned to Israel to serve in the elite unit of the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, and participated in various military operations, including the rescue of the Sabena passenger plane in 1972. Diplomacy. In the same year, Benjamin Netanyahu returned to the United States and continued his studies, receiving degrees in architecture and business administration at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. In 1976, he worked for the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, consulting firm but returned to Israel after the death of his brother, Yonatan Netanyahu, in the Entebbe raid in 1976. Netanyahu actively engaged in international counterterrorism campaigns, which laid the foundation for his political career. He served as the Israeli embassy in Washington from 1982 to 1984, and then he became Israel's ambassador to the United Nations from 1984 to 1988. During his time at the UN, he successfully led efforts to decode UN documents about war crimes committed by Nazi Germany. Political success. In 1988, Benjamin Netanyahu was elected as a member of the right-wing Likud party to the Knesset, Israeli parliament, and served as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. 5 years later, in 1993, he became the chairman of the Likud party and its candidate for Prime Minister. In 1996, he was elected as the Prime Minister of Israel, defeating the incumbent Labour Party candidate Shimon Peres. He remained in office until 1999. During his tenure, he signed the Oslo Accords with the Palestinians and promoted the peace process. He also expanded privatization, liberalized currency regulations, and reduced the budget deficit. After resigning from the Knesset, he failed to win the election against former Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Netanyahu worked in the private sector and gave lectures. He returned to politics in 2002, serving as the foreign minister and later as the finance minister. On March 31, 2009, he was sworn in as Prime Minister for the second time, forming a national unity government and calling on a non-militarized Palestinian state to recognize Israel. In a famous speech in September 2009 at Bar-Ilan University, he said, "I told President Obama in Washington that if we receive assurances about demilitarization and if Mahmoud Ahmadinejad recognizes Israel as the Jewish state, we are ready for a real peace agreement, a demilitarized Palestinian state side by side with the Jewish state." Opposition to nuclear program. However, Netanyahu found himself at odds with the United States. In November 2013, he opposed the U.S.-Iran nuclear deal, calling it a historic mistake and suggesting that the years of sanctions applied to Iran would be loosened. Netanyahu has also described Iran as the greatest threat that Israel has ever faced. Iran is seeking nuclear weapons and poses the most serious existential threat to our existence since the War of Independence. Speaking before the United Nations General Assembly in New York on September 24, 2009, Netanyahu criticized the speech of the Iranian President, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, before the assembly. He emphasized that those who believe that Iran poses a threat only to Israel are mistaken. The Iranian regime is genuinely fanatical. They want to see us return to the Middle Ages, and the struggle against Iran is a struggle of civilization against pseudo-religious extremism. In 2014, a major upheaval occurred in the region when conflict escalated between the Palestinian militant group Hamas and Israel after the murder of 3 teenagers. The Gaza Strip was targeted by the Israeli military due to it being a stronghold of Hamas, with thousands of rockets fired and strong international opposition. This led to significant civilian casualties. In December of that year, Netanyahu fired 2 of his key ministers and initiated the dissolution of the coalition government. In early March 2015, 2 weeks before the Israeli elections, Netanyahu addressed the U.S. Congress and criticized U.S. policy on the Iranian nuclear program. President Obama continued to defend the plan, and the 2 leaders had significantly different views on the goal of Iran's nuclear capabilities. Re-election in 2015 amid controversy. Netanyahu won the Israeli prime ministerial election in March 2015, defeating Isaac Herzog of the Zionist Union Alliance and securing 30 seats in the Knesset, poised to lead a coalition government. Controversy continued to swirl as analysts criticized Netanyahu for using anti-Arab rhetoric while making statements supporting a 2-state solution. On December 6, 2017, former U.S. President Donald Trump officially recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, a move condemned by the Palestinian Authority and most United Nations member states but praised by Israeli leaders. At the time, Netanyahu said that the people of Israel and the State of Israel will forever be grateful for this decision, calling it courageous and just. Seemingly bolstered by the support, Israel's parliament passed a new law in January 2018 requiring a supermajority vote to cede land in Jerusalem, effectively making it more challenging to divide the city. At the same time, the Central Committee of the Likud party brought forth a non-binding resolution supporting settlement construction and the extension of sovereignty over unliberated Israeli communities in the West Bank. In January 2020, Netanyahu appeared alongside Trump at the White House in Washington, where President Trump proposed a 2-state solution allowing Israel to annex settlements in the West Bank while establishing the capital of Palestine in East Jerusalem. Netanyahu called this plan a historic peace opportunity. Investigation and protests. In August 2017, it was revealed that Netanyahu was a suspect in 2 investigations involving allegations of fraud, breach of trust, and bribery. One case involved gifts from 2 prominent businessmen, while the second case alleged that he had pressured a newspaper for favorable coverage. Following these revelations, the Likud party introduced a bill aimed at restricting the release of information to the public during investigations, a move that drew criticism from many observers who viewed it as an attempt to shield Netanyahu from potentially adverse outcomes. On December 2, just days before the Knesset was scheduled to vote on the bill, opponents organized a mass protest with over 20,000 participants. The day after, Netanyahu announced that he had instructed his political allies to amend the bill. Benny Gantz, the then Minister of Defense, expressed opposition to the legislation and called for a halt to the legislative process in the interest of national security. In response to Gantz's objection, Netanyahu fired him the following day, triggering even larger protests across Israel and eventually leading to Netanyahu's agreement to postpone the law. Netanyahu began his 6th term as prime minister on December 29, 2022, and in the early months of this term, he focused on reforms within the judiciary, which had faced widespread criticism for its perceived negative impacts on the separation of powers, community health, women and minorities' rights, labor rights, scientific research, overall democratic health of Israel, and foreign relations. After weeks of public demonstrations and an increasing number of military reservists taking part, Defense Minister Benny Gantz voiced opposition to the reforms on March 25 and called for a pause in the legislative process in the interest of Israel's security. The following day, Netanyahu dismissed Gantz, prompting even larger protests throughout Israel and eventually leading to Netanyahu agreeing to delay the law. The political career of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been marked by a series of complex and challenging political developments. As of now, he faces the significant challenge of the conflict with Hamas. How he navigates this ongoing struggle remains to be seen, and time will tell. And that concludes today's program. Thank you for your interest and for tuning in. Goodbye, and see you next time.